for Workforce Education Training and Youth Development Committee. It is October 29, 2024. Madam Clerk, while I know this is a presentation and not legislation, could you just call the roll?
Santana,
Present.
House Jones, Ray, Jones, Sly. Spencer. Present. Star.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So today's exciting day as we're going to get an update from Build Environment on the ARPA allocations. And so I want to bring the group up. We have Michelle here. And you're going to, yep, come. Everyone just come to, everyone's going to be at the table, right? Okay, yeah.
Do you want us to introduce ourselves?
Yes. I was going to do it, but then I paused and I'm like, no, let them do it. You guys do so much of a better job. Okay.
Chairwoman, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us today. And members of council, thank you for attending. My name is Michelle Rose. I'm the CEO of the Workforce Development Board serving Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. And I'm glad to be joined here by my colleagues. I'll start with Renee.
Hi, everyone. Renee Timberlake. I'm the director of the Built Environment Collaborative.
And I'm Laura Chakra. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Workforce Development Board.
Good morning. Thank you for the
Morning.
opportunity. I am Aria Johnson. I am the Director of Construction Initiatives for the Greater Cleveland Partnership.
And good afternoon. My name is Chris Nance. I'm the Vice President of Construction at the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. And I would say to my colleagues, I know that Director Rose and I met, and also we met, the new Ms. Timberlake, the new director, and we got an update. And I do want to tell you that I want to let you know in public that I do appreciate you always reaching out to us to give us an update on the ARPA allocation and your numbers and goals. I think oftentimes council members don't get that update, and so we don't know, right, like if the money that we allocated is making a difference. So I do want to thank you for that, Director Rose. So go ahead, you could start with your presentation.
Sure, thanks so much. I'm not sure how the presentation is controlled. Oh,
Okay,
right
there
here.
we go.
The other one, actually. Great. So I'm going to walk through some things, have Renee speak, and then we're going to have our partners from GCP speak as well about the engagement. Some of these slides will be familiar to you as you have seen them before. Just as a reminder on what this project is and a little bit about the timeline. We are here in October 2024, but we started talking about this in January of 2023 when the city was allocating its once-in-a-generation ARPA investments. And we remain really grateful for this $10 million investment in what has ultimately been a very innovative and so far successful program to do these 5 core things. Engage more workers and bring them into the workforce, support them while we do so, train them, of course, and then employ them. And one thing we've seen is, one thing that was the genesis of this project was all of these new projects around our city that are remaking our city needed a strong workforce and a ready workforce in order to embark on those projects. And then the last piece here, which my GCP colleagues will speak to, which is workforce as well, is around providing business development assistance to firms that can also take advantage of these big project opportunities, but then need some help from our experts to do so. So I'm going to walk through the workforce pieces and then, again, turn over to GCP to talk about the MBE engagement. So as a reminder, when we say built environment, what we mean are these 5 families of sectors and occupations. We are pursuing training and employment for workers in construction, infrastructure, broadband deployment, climate jobs, and remediation, both lead-free homes and brownfields. We're doing that for workforce development and then also with minority business development and some special youth outreach too to spark that interest in the workforce of the future. Again, you've seen this slide before. These are the outcomes we committed to when this council passed the legislation in January 2023, updated it last June 2023, and today we're here to also talk about another update to the legislation, which is largely procedural. But before we do that, we do want to provide some of these updates. So remember that these are the outcomes we committed to achieving before the end of the grant, the end of 2026. So if you really think of it as a 3-year grant, the calendar years of 2024, 2025, and 2026, which is when the large majority of the work will occur, although we did do some things in 2023. We're about a little less than a third of the way through the grant. So I'm here to say that we're going to present you the numbers, and some really important qualitative updates as well. But I'm very pleased with the progress of implementation of this grant to date, knowing too that we are also putting our foot on the pedal and moving even faster, and really getting some things in place that will pay even more dividends towards these outcomes as we go. So this is a long list of qualitative updates, but I think they're really important to demonstrate all of this groundwork we've been laying since Council first heard and considered and passed this idea. The first is that a permanent director has been onboarded. Renee is joined by us here today. And when I say us, I primarily mean me and our deputy, now COO of the Workforce Board, Laura Chalker, who were kind of project managing this for more than a year, and it's really work that deserves a full-time director to make it the most it can be. So I'm thrilled that Renee joined us in July, and you'll be hearing from her more in a moment. And then I also wanted to just point out some White House recognition of this work. We're very proud that the Biden-Harris administration has repeatedly reached out to us from the federal government when looking for opportunities to amplify good work being done in cities and communities throughout the country, especially when it comes to the expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act dollars. I know I worked in the Biden-Harris administration at the time of the passage of the American Rescue Plan and know how important this investment was for them, but they really want to see it working on the ground. And so they'll occasionally call us and ask us for examples of how it's going. And we've submitted several of our success stories from our participants to the Treasury Department. And then last month we hosted Tom Perez, who's a senior advisor to the president, to walk through a number of ARPA projects here in Cleveland, including this one. And he attended a Cleveland Builds graduation, which was really meaningful and special. And so I just wanted to say that because I always say that this project is innovative, but you don't really get to say that about your own work. So I just wanted to point out that I think that, what we're doing here in Cleveland with this work is starting to get noticed, and that makes me very proud and grateful for your support. I am now going to turn it over to Renee to talk about some of these other qualitative updates, which she has largely pursued just in a few short months on the job, and then also walk you through some of the numbers.
Thank you, Michelle. So I'll try to run through these qualitative updates fairly quickly. As Michelle said, there is a lot here, and we even pared it down because we knew we didn't have all afternoon. So the first is that we hired a consulting firm to help us with some important marketing things like branding, and then a little bit later paid marketing. And we're getting really close to the end of the first phase of that marketing project. So just this morning, I sent out an email to partners asking them to vote on a couple of logo options. So we should have that done here soon, as well as a website. And then once those things are done, we'll really ramp up the paid marketing that's going to get the word out to the community about the Built Environment Collaborative. The AIR evaluation investment you see up there, AIR is the American Institutes of Research. I was connected to them maybe a month ago, and very quickly they actually received a grant of $95,000 to do an evaluation of the Built Environment Collaborative. They were so excited about the project and about working with us, though we had no money to give them to help with that piece of it. Within just a few days of that conversation, they were able to secure that $95,000, which we're really excited about. Basically, they're going to be helping us confirm and sort of iterate the model to make it as successful as possible, and that'll involve some analysis of how it's working currently, and then also be able to communicate the model to others. As Michelle already said, there is interest nationally in what we're doing here, and we really want to be able to share how this is working and why it's working as well as it is, and so the AIR research project is really going to help us do that. That should be done the end of December, so next time we come before this group, we will likely have more information on what was found during that process. We are currently connected to Some other really big projects happening in Cleveland. So the Site Readiness Fund for Good Jobs is one. Recompete Planning Grant, which is related to that. That's something that I've been really excited to be a part of. The Solar for All grant, as well as the climate analysis the Cleveland Foundation is running. So those have all been really important conversations, and we're making sure that we're representing the Workforce Development Board and the built environment through those sort of citywide projects that are ongoing. There are also some really exciting new collaborations forming within the BEC, and there are several I could point out. I'll just mention one for today's sake. So that's between the Spanish American Committee and Cleveland Builds. So Cleveland Builds focuses exclusively on training folks who are interested in getting into union construction jobs, and the Spanish American Committee has more of a broad focus. And so their partnership now looks like the people in the Spanish American Committee Latino construction program who are interested in union work will spend a couple of sessions with Cleveland Builds team, and Cleveland Builds will take on the union placement of those folks. And then the people in Spanish American Committee who are not interested in going into union will continue with the Latino construction program training. So that's just one small example of some of the collaborations that are happening within. We're really helping to solidify the connections between organizations so that we can break down some of these silos that are often at play in Cleveland. The employer engagement process is a new process we've solidified within the last couple of weeks with some collaboration from the ODJFS, a business service person who operates inside our building at OMJ. And so we are reaching out to construction companies and built environment related companies across the city, telling them about the built environment, and then setting up some introductory meetings where we're explaining what our value add is. And simply put, our value add is that everyone who comes through these training programs has been vetted by one of our partners. And a lot of times what employers are looking for is a simple sort of vetting process of, will they show up on time? Do they understand how difficult the work is going to be? And are they ready to do that kind of work? So that's one of the things that we're offering employers. And then also the trainee fund. Once they hire somebody, if that person runs into some barriers, if they came through one of our programs, then they're eligible for barrier removal assistance through this trainee fund. And those are both really big selling points for a lot of the employers that we're talking to. We are also working with our partners to, every Friday, this ODJFS partner, Molly, will send out an email to all of our organizational partners, as well as again, vetted list of people who have completed the training, so that they're getting updates on the jobs that are available in the built environment on a weekly basis. The breakfast, with the help of Turner Construction, Sheena Fain at Turner. This was actually originally, it came out of a conversation with her, as well as the staff at Cleveland Builds. We're working on inviting the major general contractors and construction management companies in the city to a breakfast that CEA, a Construction Employers Association, is going to host on site, and they'll also provide the breakfast. And we're going to be introducing the Built Environment Collaborative to all of those partners and making sure they understand what it is and how we can help them meet their talent needs. We're also pretty excited about this. We're going to be having an apprentice and a supervisor combination talking about the experience of this kind of new relationship between Cleveland Builds, apprentices who go through their program, and supervisors who are having to learn how to change the culture of their companies in order to work with women and people of color who historically have not really been part of the building trades to the extent as they are now. One really exciting for me employer update is that we now have 4 companies, the ODOT, Ohio Department of Transportation, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, First Energy, and Digital Sea, who have all agreed to prioritize hiring through the Built Environment Collaborative. So we've identified a process through which Built Environment participants will check a box or write down that they're part of the Built Environment Collaborative, and those people's applications will move to the top of the list. And again, going back to the sort of value add that the built environment is bringing to these employers, they get hundreds of people applying for these jobs, and this is one way to help them sort of narrow down that list while still making sure that they're hiring people who have historically not been really thought of for these jobs. And then the last update here is that I'm working on building out aligned partners. But Michelle, can you switch to the next slide so we can talk a little bit more in depth? You might see that one of the gentlemen sitting at the table here today is in the picture on the slide right now, Councilman Starr. And
I almost didn't see you. The suit. I'm so used to
yeah.
the suit.
So the picture is from one of the events that Cordell Stokes has been organizing with many council people. So I appreciate all of you who have worked with him on pulling together these recruitment events. Most of them have happened on the east side. He did email us this morning and said he wanted to make sure we let you all know he's now working on building out some west side events as well. You'll see in the left two columns that those are our funded partners. So these partners have not changed since the last time you would have seen this list. What has changed is the aligned partners on the right. My goal with aligned partners is really to get anyone who is doing this work of getting Cleveland residents into built environment work, sitting at the same table so that we're all part of this larger conversation about how we make this happen as smoothly as possible. So some of those, I won't go through all of them, but I do want to focus on the City of Cleveland Office of Equal Opportunity. Thanks to Director Tyson Mitchell, we now have an ongoing relationship with OEO, and they are coming to each of our meetings, and when community benefits agreements are signed, that office will give us updates on who the company was that signed the CBA, and also on what the terms of the CBA were, so that we're aware and can partner with that company to help them meet those goals. So I think we can move on. I wish that I could give you very up-to-date information. Unfortunately, our quarterly reports are due tomorrow, and so the timing wasn't quite perfect. But you can see that as of June 30th, we were exceeding all of our targets, our demographic targets. So we were already at 905 people enrolled. We had 28 placed. We're hoping that number is higher this time around. And you can see that our placements of African American people, Latinx folks, and women all exceed the goals set for December, for the end of this grant cycle, by a few to several percentage points, and so we're really happy about that. And the minority business enterprise engagement, the commitment is for 150. Most of that is with our partners here at GCP, and I think they've blown up that number 37 in the last 3 months, so that should be quite a bit different as well. And then the next slide is looking at the trainee fund. And this I updated yesterday. Since yesterday, we've had another $33,000 of requests come through just in the last 24 hours. So the majority right now of the trainee fund is going to help cover things like gear, equipment, tools that folks need in order to start in their apprentices. But we're also working with apprentices currently to make sure that they are outfitted to be able to stay in those apprenticeship positions and to be successful in those. You can see we've helped with childcare, we've helped with transportation, we've helped with housing, we've helped with quite a bit of fees, including things like insurance to cover the bond for contractor's license, as well as certification, the actual cost of certifications for lead certification licenses. So that's where we stand with the trainee fund. Again, if you ask me again tomorrow, it'll be $30,000 to $40,000 more spent than it is today, and that scene will change a little bit.
I'm going to go for one more slide, and then I'm very eager for you to hear from Arya and Chris about the work they're doing on minority business cultivation. You may have heard the councilwoman and I talking at the beginning about this being today's quarterly update for council on how the Built Environment Collaborative is going. But I'm also here to talk about legislation that was introduced last night at council, which is fairly procedural. Again, the timeline was in January 2023, council first passed this idea and allocated 10 million of the city's American Rescue Plan dollars for this. We updated that legislation in June 2023 to name the 14 project partners. And today we are here to ask for the combination of those contracts into a single contract between the city and the Workforce Development Board. Because, as you may remember, in July of this year, the Workforce Development Board became a nonprofit entity. This the information on this can be found in Ordinance 1030, 2023, which you passed last October. So the city and the county councils passed this legislation, and then we executed the transition to a nonprofit in July of this year. It's going very well, and one of the things, and I'm happy to talk about that at length as well, but that's not why we're here today. But one of the things it enables is the ability for the city and the Workforce Board now to enter into one single contract where we will manage all of these subcontracted partners who are receiving built environment funding, instead of the city managing 14, at times 15 contracts month by month. So this is a streamlining effort. Again, the legislation was introduced last night. It's 1189 if it hasn't come across your desks yet. I am happy to answer any and all questions on this, and I'm also happy to come back for when you're ready to consider and release it, which will hopefully be soon. But it's fortuitous timing that we were able to get it introduced yesterday, so at least you have it in front of you, and I'll save any more comments on this until the end of the presentation, because like I said, I'm eager to have Chris and Aria go, but really eager to talk to you about this as well and answer any questions that you might have about it. So now I think we're ready to switch to the other slide deck, which, Inez, are you able, I'll work on that.
Can you switch to the other deck? Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect.
So one of the things that, again, my name is Chris Nance, Vice President of Construction at the Greater Cleveland Partnership. One of the things that Michelle and I have in common is that we were either lucky enough or smart enough, and I tend to think we were lucky enough to hire two people on the same day. Michelle hired Renee, and we did not know this, and I hired Aria on the same day. And so today, to your benefit and to your good fortune, you will be hearing less from me and more from my colleague, Aria Johnson. And then let me quickly round third and come home. One of the things that the built environment investment by the city has allowed us to do is to expand our capacity to do the work, right? I know many of you through a number of different kind of walks of life, both in the hall and outside of the hall, but I simply did not have the wherewithal to do the nitty-gritty one-on-one follow-up work with businesses that Aria is now doing every single day. So I am thrilled to have her on board, and Aria is now going to move forward with the presentation and certainly available to support any questions you may have afterwards.
Thank you, Chris. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to share the work that I've been doing over at Greater Cleveland Partnership since I started. And we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So this is just kind of an overview of what we'll go through as far as the implementation plan and how we're working on building the pipeline of MBE contractors and being able to access various partnerships to provide benefit to coming into the Built Environment Collaborative, and then the overview of what those efforts are looking like. So our overall program objective when we are looking at our firms is to promote and advance the success of our owners of color, and that's across the construction sector. And how we do that is through our involvement with the BE Collaborative, but also coaching and mentorship, and then being intentional and having those targeted connections to partners that allow us to offer those opportunities. And then also focusing on our CUBE Symposium, which is where we convene owners, construction managers, as well as our MBE firms to solidify those partnerships and have greater opportunity throughout the city. So what that looks like, so coming on board and being able to assess how we were going to really engage with our MBE firms and really have some intentional outcomes, we came up with a diagram of what that should look like. So at first it's that identification piece, so looking at who's out there, where they're located and what they're doing, and then being able to move into that engagement piece. Now we do want to explain that the identification, that engagement really comes before I'm able to do that assessment, because it is a relationship. You know, when you take the time to get into the nitty-gritty of people's businesses, and I'm asking about revenue and I'm asking about business development, it's really important to already know that we're out here, we're doing the work, and I'm really intentional about trying to help them scale and grow. So then I'm able to move into that assessment piece. That assessment piece, it is phased out, but the first phases that I take them through is business development, HR, and training, and their financial measurements. Again, it's sometimes people think that if we get that next project, that's really where it's at. You know, we got a project, we won a bid, but it's really to make sure that they can actually scale and grow and get the project after that and the one after that. So doing that assessment and focusing on their business metrics before we actually get to the construction part of the assessment is really integral to being able to pivot and really fill those blanks where they're needed before they can scale beyond they're able to control. And then we look into that activation piece. So with that assessment, when I move into activation, I'm able to do what I call a GAP, or a growth action plan. That growth action plan really allows me to assess, again, those steps that they need to identify before they're able to really be successful on larger projects. So within that activation, I am actively speaking with them. We're doing something similar to like a business boot camp, and focusing on where those needed areas are. And then the coaching and mentorship piece, because the intentionality behind it is to have this live on beyond the end of the funding period as well. So being able to implement coaching and mentorship so that they're able to take all of those business development skills and everything that we went through to be able to move that work forward for them outside of the period by which we are basically kind of hand-holding and helping along that path. And then the tracking and reporting throughout.
Is this a point?
Yes.
Oh, clear.
Madam Chairwoman, to Mrs. Johnson, I'm enjoying your report. Is this both businesses in addition to workers?
So through the chair to the council member, the focus is on the minority businesses, which they do align perfect, because as we scale our minority businesses, we also will be looking to fill them with workers.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To Mrs. Johnson.
Councilman.
So really building that pipeline and what this looks like, and these are various MBEs, and I broke them down by their scope. That also makes identifying where within a construction project that I need to access those connections. But so far, that's a total of 167 up there on the screen. And you can just kind of see that breakdown of where I've identified these MBE firms. Again, these are just in that identification period, and then moving towards that engagement period, which I'm able to engage through our various partnerships, whether it's through LED or the certification process, training opportunities, the business boot camp, things like that. And then meeting those firms, again, the really integral part here is meeting them where they are. So I have some of those firms that, yes, they're ready to take on that next major project, but then some of them do need a little bit of help, even like responding to an RFQ or an RFP. So this is some of those identified firms that we have so far. So partnerships, it's really big when looking into these, the work that we're doing with our firms, because if we consider all of the opportunities that are out there, or, you know, this fund is doing this, we really want it to be tangible and have opportunities on the other end of that pipeline. So working with our partners over at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, where they've identified over 1,000+ homes that need to be lead remediated, working with them to build that pipeline of minority contractors that are able to fill that work. So I did have some that were already lead certified, and then we took it to the next level and started to identify ones that the scope was within their wherewithal, but then they just needed to get the lead certification, and then working with the built environment and the Breaking Barriers Fund to be able to cover those funds. and then working with Western Reserve Area Agency on Housing, amongst a few other partnerships that we do have in the works to be able to have that level of housing and community on the residential side as well, because that's an excellent starting point for our construction owners that are a minority and small businesses. But working with them, we're able to identify the homes that they needed to be ADA compliant for their senior clients. And so being able to identify those MBEs that are able to fulfill those smaller packages of work, whether that's installing of grab bars, wheelchair ramps, shower handles, things of that nature, to really pay attention to what it takes for our seniors to be safe in their homes and the community with them. And then in transit, we also have a close relationship with over at Cleveland Hopkins Airport, and really identifying how we can ensure our MBE firms are able to get opportunity on that project as they start to roll out. A big part of that was gaining experience, so also working with other airports surrounding that are doing work in smaller projects to make sure that our MBE firms are able to seek those opportunities and gain experience in preparation for our own. So I hit on that coaching and mentorship piece, but I think it is really important to identify what that means for our firms, because, we can, again, it's meeting people where they are and being able to pay attention to what it takes to run a successful and sustainable business over time. So when we consider the coaching and the mentorship piece, it is business development being one of it, and that's the first part of that assessment that I conducted, where I identified the business development needs, finance, back office, HR support, whether that's in software, things like that as well. But then really partnering with industry experts and people that are out there already doing the work and successfully, especially our minorities that are able to pull other minorities through the pipeline. So being able to work with those experts and identify the business needs of the individuals, and it really, a lot of that takes experience and understanding the market. And so when we work with our industry experts that are out there that are doing the work, then they're able to actively be someone that they can call on for our firms. And then company culture, because you can have all of these things in place, but if you have terrible company culture, you can still have a failing business. So being able to identify what it takes culturally within the organization to make sure that they are sound and able to grow through that as well. And so what that means looking ahead as we continue to roll out our program and identify our firms and put them through this process is really creating more connections with greater intention. The more partnerships we have, the more opportunities I'm able to share with my MBE firms, and collaborating with stakeholders throughout the built environment collaboration that we are, again, working with CMP and others throughout the collaboration to be able to have those partnerships and opportunities. And then really how we house that data. So we have a lot of information coming in and identifying our MBE firms, but because this work is new, there's not necessarily a baseline. And so I like to create that so that maybe in the next 2, 3, 5 years, we have a strong baseline of data that allows us to identify the true needs of our MBE firms in our industry. And then again, planning for a robust CUBE event, and that'll be coming up in April of 2025. And again, thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Aria, and welcome on board. She knows what she's talking about. Yeah, great presentation.
Told
Thank
ya.
you. Yes. So as I mentioned when I started the meeting, I had a chance to meet with you, so I don't have much questions, but I do want to talk about just the recent experience that I had. So just in the past couple weeks, I went to visit, and I attended 2 construction job fairs for developments that are taking place in my area. And what I noticed is, as I sat with each major contractor, was that they already had their employees in place, right? And so for me, I got a sense that it was just checking the box, right? And so my question, it was first of all disheartening. I think this project was approved before the CBAs, which we will talk about afterwards. But anyone that would like to answer this, like in your field, how committed do you feel that developers and major contractors are to, individual contractors or maybe one of the skilled laborers that are out there?
So I think there's been a lot of talk of whether people are actually hiring now or not, and I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are companies that are hiring, and we do know, I think one of the big differences here is that we are introducing a new labor pool to these companies, and that is changing the way that they have to do business. So that's one thing that's a bit different. And I think is going to take a little bit of time to adjust, is having to, knowing where to go to find people to hire. I think what you're describing is, I've heard that from other people too, that some companies are showing up and saying, maybe it's checking a box, maybe it's being on people's radar, so when they are hiring, they have a list of folks to choose from. But that is not a reflection of the industry at large. I've also heard that because, and this is, I'm hearing this from reliable sources, I'll keep them anonymous, but that because it's an election year, things are a little slow at the moment, and as soon as next Wednesday, we might see a big pickup, depending on how the presidential election lands on Tuesday. So those are some of the things that I've heard. Part of this employer outreach that we're doing at OMJ is really around finding those people who are hiring right now, but who are not tapped into sort of the traditional routes of getting people into these jobs. And we also know from unions that they are looking for people. They're just not looking quite in the numbers, I think, that we would all like to see, but that doesn't mean they won't be at some point. So I guess the short answer is that I do believe that there are enough jobs out here for the people who were putting through this pathway. It's just a matter of making sure we're connected to those employers.
Yeah. Okay, good. And you answered my second question. Do we at this point have this capacity? Because if we don't, and the CBA is requesting a certain percentage requirement,
Yeah.
are we ready to meet those requirements through CBA? And so from what I get from the developers, I mean not the developers, but the contractors, when I was sort of interviewing them, is, well, we don't have enough contractors out there, right? And I repeatedly kept hearing that, and it's like, I'm hearing one thing from the presenters and all these local initiatives, but then I'm hearing something else from the developers and the contractors.
And there is, to the chair, thank you for your question. There's a phrase that perhaps Councilman Starr and I both learned in business school, culture eats strategy for lunch. The culture of the construction industry is one that is slow to change. That's first point. Second point is that we are changing it. The community benefit ordinance with the requirement of CBAs, and as council knows, with your support and direction, that legislation passed because I believe it's realistic. It provides developers options for ways to engage the community. So every project, to the chair, might not be able to hire all the workers that we would like to see them hire, but perhaps there is a way for them to engage some suppliers of color, or be able to engage in some of our other aspects of the CBO. So I think it's a both-and approach. And then my final thought is that in response to your last question, and also going back to an observation that Renee Timberlake shared, establishing the working relationship between this effort and, of course, with council, but also with the administration, OEO, with the oversight responsibility. The earlier we have the information relative to individual projects, and the earlier we receive that information, the better able we are to activate this network that's specifically been built through this initiative to try to make those connections. Your example was perhaps, but the reality is there's a lot of projects that are already in motion that we're going to realistically not have the opportunity to influence. But going forward, we hope to influence more and more of those projects as a direct result of this collaborative work.
Thank you, Chris. So and this is my last question before I open it up, and let me know if you guys have any questions, but what do you say, what's the timeline, or, how long is it going to take for us to have the capacity, the workforce there to be able to work on all these projects that council is approving, right? Like, there's just millions of dollars that we're approving every day for the city of Cleveland. But once again, I always get the response, like, we don't have enough workers.
To the chair, thanks for your question. And your question gets at the heart of why we started this initiative over any other sectoral focus. Again, almost almost 2 years ago now, because we saw both what we knew would be huge investments from the federal government in infrastructure and construction projects, and we knew there would be a local focus on construction remediation, all of these big redevelopment projects, and our workforce wasn't there. Everything in workforce is a long-term proposition, but this one needs to move quickly, and we are. I think that number of 3,000 enrollments by the end of 2026 is ambitious, but it is doable. We wouldn't have chosen it if it wasn't both. But there's also, as you know, pretty steady work for construction workers, primarily right now. And so we feel confident in the ongoing demand for this work, but it is both. There's both ongoing demand and we are beginning to fill it. So the other thing I would note about your question is not only is workforce always a long-term proposition, but it's also always a coalition of the willing. And so one thing about our project is we've always had these willing partners like GCP and the others who have subcontracts, but we really need that engagement of the employers. And that's why the work Renee is doing to bring on more institutional employers is so important, because then we have their commitment that they will be pulling workers through our pipeline, and that those people will have jobs and they will have the workers they need. So it's really a symbiosis of what we are offering them and what they need. But yes, time is of the essence always.
Thank you, Director. Thank you. So now I'll open it up to my colleagues. I have Spencer on the list. Councilwoman Spencer. Are you on the list?
Thank you. This is a great discussion so far. It's so nice to be with everybody. Madam Chair, one of my main questions was going to be about our community benefits ordinance and how this is all fitting together, and I think we've had great discussion about that so far. I wanted, though, to take a moment because thinking back to how we were pre-CBO, pre-community benefits ordinance, if I recall correctly, it was sort of, a developer or contractor would say, well, I tried and I couldn't find anybody. And if I understand our CBO correctly, now it's just saying you tried isn't good enough. And so I really think that there's, for that reason alone, there is a lot of value in these report outs and updates, because that is a total culture shift, to reference what Mr. Nance was saying, right? I tried and it just didn't work out, as opposed to you are being held to these metrics. So just looking forward to the continued discussion. I wanted to take a moment through the chair to, if we could, just to ask Ms. Johnson and Ms. Timberlake, just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds, and what led you to this moment? Just a little brief personal story update on how you got here.
Of course. So that is a great question. I didn't write that one down, no. So I'm from a CMSD graduate. So I did graduate from South High School in 2009. And so undergrad, I did go to the University of Toledo, and I did basically marketing and new media design or graphic design and web. So when I actually came back home, I started doing marketing. I had my own marketing firm, and I started doing marketing for the AKA Team Commercial Construction Company. And then I actually ended up just diving in and really falling in love with the culture there, and ended up there for almost 7 years, by which, so I went from marketing to a project engineer, maybe a couple titles in between, but I ended up being the Chief Diversity Officer. So that allowed me the opportunity to gain a very vast experience in the construction industry, but also from the lens of diversity. And so I did get my MBA, and then I'm currently working finishing at CSU, doing basically diversity leadership change management, but it is concentrated in public administration. So being able to bring all of those backgrounds together, focused on business, our communities, and our minority businesses, and the pillars it takes to be successful there, is how I landed working with Chris.
You have been very busy. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Thank you, Councilwoman Spencer. So most of my professional background has been in getting low-income and first-generation students into and successful in college, actually. And I don't know if this is common knowledge, but the 6-year graduation rate for low-income first-generation students is 11%. Wow. And I was feeling, the longer I was doing that work, the more I was feeling that there's got to be a better path, that there were, students are taking out loans, and a lot of them are not completing the degree, and yet they still have the loan. And it's not for any fault of their own. It's for a lot of times academic preparation and under-resourced schools. A lot of times it's financial constraints that they have because of, they're taking care of siblings or helping families. There are a lot of these factors that are outside of their control. And I just didn't feel like it was the right path for me. So I did this career shift just a few years ago and landed at United Way as the Director of Economic Mobility. My interest in education had always been in poverty. How do we get people out of poverty? And so I was really excited to be able to dig into sort of other venues for moving from, financially constrained state of being to an economically stable and sort of thriving way of life. And I should say I've also been a single mom for the last 21 years, so a lot of what I deal with or think through is also based on the personal experience of having been a financially struggling single mom for a good chunk of the last 20-some years. At United Way, I did a few things, but the thing I know Michelle would most want me to talk about, and I'm most proud of, is that I started the Social Determinants of Work initiative, which really is identifying, the idea behind it was how do we change the narrative around how we talk about people who are trapped in financial hardship. It's not a lack of motivation, especially right towards the end of the pandemic, you heard people accusing folks of being lazy, and that's why they weren't working. And we really wanted to change this narrative. And so the social determinants of work, which you can look up on United Way's website, still cover things like childcare, healthcare, access to justice, education, broadband access, job flexibility, things like that, home and community health. And I think of these as things that serve as either barriers or catalysts to economic mobility. One way or another, we all interact with them. If they work out in our favor, then we tend to do well. If they don't work out in our favor, then we tend to do poorly. And there are a lot of systematic structures in place that predict whether we will experience these things or not. And so that work really led me towards to be involved in the Built Environment Collaborative. I was involved in the trainee fund pretty early on in helping Laura and Michelle identify how it was going to be used and what kinds of things it should address. And so that's kind of how I ended up in this role. Coincidentally, I also have a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and studied sustainable building and agriculture, which this is the first time since I graduated in 2001 that I'm using that degree, which is pretty exciting. And I'm also in a PhD program at Case and planning on doing my dissertation on the trainee fund and the impact that it's had on folks who have utilized it.
I'm so glad I asked. Just thank you for sharing your personal stories and what is bringing you to this work. And it's, head work and heart work and values. And you're both so busy. My mind's pretty blown. But please keep at it.
Thank you.
And I think I'll just conclude, Madam Chair. I wanted to comment. I really enjoyed participating in the Built Environment Job Fair with Cordell and team and Louie and team. I mean, I just had a ball. I really did. It felt joyful to me. And so I don't know if more of those are coming back, but we want to be in we want to be in the cycle. We want to participate. And then on that note, as you're developing this additional marketing, we really are partners. I mean, our passion is connecting our residents to opportunity. Absolutely. I think that's what we think about all day long, as how to connect. We know about opportunities. How do we get our residents connected to those. And so whether it's participating in the fairs, whether it's putting materials in our newsletters, whatever that may be, please share those with us, keep us updated so we can partner with you to support the success. So, all right. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Great questions. Next, I have Councilman Starr.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am a big supporter of built environment. I've had the honor and pleasure of hosting, I believe, 4 to 5 different opportunities for different folks to come around to get signed up to receive some of this certification, things like that, as well as getting the training, getting them into the different programs that Ohio Means Jobs have, as well as other individuals that's under this umbrella. One thing I definitely would just point out to my colleagues, the thing is, when we talk about these development and we talk about these different projects, a good faith effort does not shouldn't sit well with any of us. And what I mean by that is your community benefits package, you have to negotiate that before you give any legislation. And what I mean is, before I give a TIF or before I give any incentive that's coming from taxpayer dollars, that is in place. And if you do it from the front end, you can be more strategic and intentional on your purpose, meaning before we start talking about this project, okay, who's the architect? Who is going to do the HVAC? Who is going to be the partner? And then how do you talk about that mentor relationship, which is more so a partnership? And therefore, you could then have some type of contractor that's MBE, FBE certified on the front end of the equity part of the project. So therefore, they can work with the developer to make sure they reach these goals. I know that we oftentimes hear, well, we don't have people doing this. That's why you have to be intentional and strategic from the front end. So that's what I do with projects that I have in Ward 5. Creating those marriages and those relationships, so therefore you can have that level up, scaled up opportunity. So therefore, if someone is from the minority or someone who don't have the capacity is looking to be able to do some development, getting them with a big company who already done projects can get them the skills and the tools that they need. Because one thing I can assure you is, when you talk about a mentorship, some of these people are already doing the work. They just don't have the technical skills behind it. So within that relationship, they can get that technical skills and build on that. Now they could be the ones coming to the table with a development opportunity where they could then switch the roles a little bit so they could advance. So I will urge you, when you're doing these developments, when you're doing these projects in your ward, take the initiative to sit down and work with them. What I've done with one of my projects is I had a Thursday meeting every day from 10 o'clock to 10:30. This 30 minutes was for me to be able to understand where we are at with the project, long before I pass any legislation to give additional dollars to them. Then also having that on your back end, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So what we can do is to hold them to make sure before the shovel's in the ground, we know who was doing what, who was monitoring this, and how can it go through. It can't be just an OEO responsibility. It has to be a led initiative as a partnership that you watch it. So therefore, I then will look at compliance audit summary from OEO to understand where they are at for the goals. And therefore, then I'm able to do community benefits. So I am pleased and thankful that I was able to work out something with Lincoln Yee and the meat producing factory that we passed legislation for. But what they did was sat down with me every Thursday at 10 o'clock. We talked about the project. They worked with a partnership with Next Generation Construction. And within that partnership, Next Generation Construction has started their own Next Generation Developers, and they're looking to do some development. But through this project that they started doing the breaking the ground and doing some renovations and upgrades in the old Goodwill building, the Majestic Hotel, I know how they're going to reach their goals already. Their goals that they are planning to reach is already in writing. And if we don't do that on all projects, then the people in our neighborhoods, the people in our residents that we serve, they're not going to get a piece of it. They're not at the table. They're on the menu. And that's what we have to do to make sure they're not that part. They have the equity. So what I try to tell you is a difference between when you doing the subcontracting and being a partner. Because when you're subcontracting and you're part of that, you putting up the money for 3 months, 90 days. But when you're a partner, you don't have to do that. And that's some of the things that some of our people have not been previewed to because the infrastructure hasn't been set in place. But I urge us as leaders, as the ones who are with the ribbon cutting, the ones who are helping giving them the money, we have to do that beforehand. So therefore, you are able to know long before they do the project who is doing what. And I think you will be really pleased with some of the things, how you can figure stuff out. Because there's some things we might not have minorities that are certified yet. But therefore, now you can work with Office of Equal Opportunity, Zach Reed, to make sure they certify local, make sure they certify state, and now they're able to do that, and they have everything in place. So I want to say thank you, Built Environment, for working with me in Ward 5. Definitely doing some different things. I just wanted to make sure I point that out to our colleagues, like, oh, there's ways to do it. And before we get that piece of legislation or we support it, have everything in writing. And next thing you know, when you go through that compliance audit report with OEO, you can see where they are at in the project, and then you could be able to say, whoa, 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 whoa. And I think that has helped me on 3 projects that I'm working on in Ward 5, and I think it was something that was eye-opening to me. But definitely one question I would have to the chair, when I looked at this PowerPoint presentation, and make sure I say it right. Okay, I see as of June 30th of 2024, we've had 905 enrolled. And then it says only 28 placed. Through the chair, can someone explain why there's so little that are placed after we didn't enroll 905 through the chair?
To Councilman Starr, thank you both for the work you're doing, for your support, and for your question. The answer really is that just sort of gets back to what Michelle said earlier about workforce being sort of long-term. So we expect to see that number shift. These are early data points for this project, and placement takes significantly longer than most of us want it to. I believe that the work I'm doing, trying to get more employers engaged in this, is going to help speed up that process. But we are not surprised by the difference between those two things, and expect the longer we go on, the narrower that difference between the two numbers will become.
Okay, and to that point, what is our relationship, or what is our strategy, I would say, from a workforce educational standpoint? How have we partnered with our schools? And what I mean by that is, how do we get it into a point where trades is a requirement class as early as like 9th grade, so we can fill this void? Because I know I've done some studies and I've seen some information that by year 2032, it is projected that trade initiative and programs could possibly be extinct because there's not that many people filling it. So what type of exposure or partnership that we have with CMSD, not just the selected schools, but as a requirement potentially for students to learn a different 2 or 3 trade exposure long before they graduate, so they could possibly get some certification and exposed into the industry. Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilman, thank you so much for that question. This comes up in every conversation I have about workforce, whether it's for healthcare or manufacturing or tech, is how do employers get access to our students? And sometimes we often think of it the other way around, which is how do we get students access to careers? We have what employers want, which is their future workforce. And our priority so far, our strategy so far as a community, has been focused on the importance of exposure and exposure of a broad variety of opportunities. So I'm not really going to get into requirements today, but I think the best thing we can do for students in our schools, whether they're at Max Hayes or another school that is less specialized, is share with them real world opportunities of what it means to work in this industry. And that way, we are lucky that a lot of the employers and training partners that we are already working with are in the schools through the Greater Cleveland Career Consortium and through the PACE curriculum to share what it might mean to be a residential construction worker versus a commercial construction worker versus a plumber. And that's just construction. Remember, we're also talking about remediation jobs and climate jobs and energy jobs and broadband deployment. So there's so many opportunities just in this project that we want to be sharing with students. And that can start as early as 6th grade, but as they get closer to graduation, we want them having internships, apprenticeships. We want everyone with really good knowledge of what's out there, and in particular, the really good pay and benefits that a lot of these built environment jobs provide. We want to make sure that's super clear to students. Now, as the leader of the workforce system, I have to be sector agnostic because I got to help everybody, but I really hope that this construction and built environment work and the opportunities available in it are very clear to all of our graduating students.
Yes, and I know I'm almost on time, so I think that is great. But also, I believe PACE program does a lot of different out-of-school experience, career advising. And for myself, a CMSD grad, I did go to South for a little bit, so I definitely would bring up some time before I was before I went to another school. We just say that. And what I would say is, back then you had cosmetology. And everybody was going there for cosmetology because that was a great program. People were able to become barbers, hair braiders, hairstylists, all those different things. And they were coming out of school, rather out of school, getting ready to take their state board test and their exam because they had all the career. You had health careers. Health careers was here, and people were going into health careers solely for the medical field. And it was something that was offered. We don't have that no more. So I like PACE giving you exposure, but we have to change this up.
Yeah.
And the problem that we have in our city is we allow our kids to make decisions when they're kids.
That's right.
You don't have the autonomy. So I have this whole belief that there's things that you do in place to a child long before that. So I do believe, like, obviously I'm a sports guy. I believe all children should be exposed to 5 sports by the age of 9 years old. By that time, you can figure out, does the kid really like sports, or does the kid want to be into arts, or do they want to be into something else? But you're able to expose them. The same thing in career field. Our kids should be required to learn a trade. Now, I have experience with working with kids when I did my experience with managing Building Great Futures with Boys and Girls Club, as well as the Youth Opportunities Unlimited, a partnership. Kids first was like they didn't want to do it. We offered it, and then they found out about the HVAC. Then they found out about the plumbing. Then they found out about the demolition. They found drywall, which they disliked most of. They said that's a lot of work. But once we exposed them, and they were working 10 weeks during the summer, and they were getting they was doing 35 hours, and they were making $13, $14 an hour, and they were getting paid every week, seeing $280 every week. Our kids was there on time, no problem, and they were doing it. And they were getting offered this in 11th and 12th grade. Now imagine if I get a chance to explore all of the trades. By the time I get in 9th grade, by the time I graduate high school, I got my plans on what I want to do. If I choose to go to college, I got it, but I got a skill for life. And I was in there learning the same trades with them, doing my OSHA certification. So my whole thing is, I have a meeting scheduled in December with Dr. Morgan. I got a meeting scheduled with Dr. Baston as well as his meeting in December. And my whole focus is, how do we work to get it to a point that our kids are going to get this certification as a requirement long before they graduate? Not saying we have to pick which one they have to get into, but they should be exposed to more than 3 or 4, so by the time they graduate, they have a path just in case they don't want to go to college. And that is something we need to do, and definitely need something that we need for our city. And it's also a career opportunity because college is not for everyone. Thank you, Chair.
You are right on time. 1 minute. Thank you, Councilman Starr. Next up, I have Councilman Slife.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for the presentation. I don't say this to be like derisive or anything. I think that there's a lot of good work happening, but it's premature to say we've successfully solved any issue because there's really some lagging indicators here. So I guess I know this is maybe kind of maybe too macro of a question, but are you able to speculate on if we keep on this path, when are we going to begin to kind of see in kind of external data or just civic impression that we're starting to get onto the other side of this issue of barriers in getting minority community members into the trades?
Through the chair to the councilman, I think it's a good question. I really believe in the outcomes that we set, that we've remained committed to this whole time. I think we will see that placement number improve. The focus in this project of enrollments as the key indicator is a choice we made, a somewhat controversial one at times, but in workforce, typically you care only about placements. But one thing we really wanted to do here was prioritize enrollments, particularly because we knew that at that point of enrollment, these primarily young people, but these city residents would be connected to better supportive services than they have at almost any other training program in the city. So I think making sure that enrollment number stays on track will be really important. We want to see a growth in the placement or employment numbers. I'm confident we will meet that 800. But the ways we will know this is working, and I think I'm going to let Aria answer too from her perspective, but from the workforce perspective, the ways we will know this are working are that there is a cultural shift, what Councilman Sarr was just saying around the skilled trades as a desirable career. That's qualitative, but I think it's really important that these kinds of careers feel like an exciting choice after graduating from high school. And we will know when the construction employers who are selected for all of the projects around this entire city no longer complain that they can't find workers, and that they understand where to pull their highly qualified and trained workers from. You want to?
If you'd like to add anything, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair to the councilman. So it is on the minority business side. When I visualize seeing that change, is really seeing our MBEs be able to perform as primes on these larger projects, and so that's really a big, major point of also the business development side of what we do, because the partnership methodology is a very great way to gain that experience and have those opportunities, but to really create sustainable businesses that can be ran long term and really create generational wealth through our minority businesses will be the ideal point by which we see, but being able to transform through that.
Thank you. And as a follow-up to that, so if a young woman were to enroll in a program tomorrow, how long do you anticipate kind of either whether it's maintaining a relationship or kind of tracking her progress and moving forward? How often does that, or for how long does that relationship endure? Or is there a certain point where it's like you've enrolled, you made the placement, and we were not looking to, you've succeeded, you've graduated, you're out on your own, so.
Through the chair to the councilman, that depends largely on the partner. So as you saw on the slide earlier, we have at this point almost 20 different organizations that are partners within this collaborative. For some organizations, like Towards Employment, they have a model where they keep in touch, and not just keep in touch, they have an official relationship for a year after a person is placed in a job. So that mentoring relationship continues on for 1 year. There are other organizations that do something less official or something that is as official but not as long. And often the relationship continues simply because it turns out people really like each other. So for example, I was at Regency last week, and I met with 2 apprentices, 2 women who'd gone through Cleveland Builds, had been placed in apprenticeships at Regency, and both of them, they went through Cleveland Builds in 2022 and 2023, are still in touch with Cleveland Builds staff. They share their successes with them. Cleveland Builds invites them to events, like when secretary or director, Perez was here last month. And so they also know that they can reach out to Cleveland Builds, or the other participants can reach out to Spanish American Committee, for example, or Towards Employment, even if they no longer have that sort of official participant mentor relationship. Some of those relationships really continue on.
Okay. I ask because I'd like to think through, and this is going to get a bit beyond your guys' specific workflow, but it's something I've been thinking about. If you look at, this is 2022 ACS data, so it's not census, but it's pretty, as accurate as an estimate could be. If you look at just the population of Cleveland that's under the age of 18, it's about 54% black. If you go up to the next age cohort from 18 to 34, it drops to about 41% black. So there's this huge drop off of people that seem to be, I suspect, leaving the city. And I think that we're constantly on this side of the table faced with this juxtaposition of is it people or place? And I think in a situation like this where we're doing really, really good work for people, I worry sometimes that, to Ms. Timberlake's point, if we want to bring people out of poverty, I continue to worry that sometimes we are still stuck in this rut where bringing people out of poverty results in people also leaving Cleveland. And I don't want it to be the case that people feel that they need to leave the city, or that leaving the city is an achievement, that we're able to, at the same time, bring people out of poverty and retain people within our communities. And we've been doing a lot of work, like the Middle Neighborhood Strategy, Councilman Jones and I, and a lot of things to try to stave that outflow and to support communities. And I'd love to think through ways that we can develop enduring relationships with the people that, like these, who are bringing through programs, so that we can connect them to home ownership, get them involved in the community, because it's a great to do things for people. I don't want to discourage that, and I think people are first and foremost our most important thing, but I don't want to do so without thinking of kind of this larger system that we're working within. And I've heard people say, the city continues to invest in programs as like this. Yet if you look at the kind of data breakdown of Cleveland and poverty rates, these seem to be really entrenched challenges. And my response to that is I think that we've done a lot of really, really good work, but we haven't really quite made that connection yet of how to help people while also helping place at the same time. And what we end up with, I think, is the people that we've helped are just no longer appearing in the data ongoing because they've left the city for the region, beyond the region. So I know that this is beyond your specific workflow, but I'd love to kind of think through if an organization's kind of having a one-year mentorship after a placement, I'd love to think through like a 10-year mentoring program where we are connecting people back to resources so that we are able to retain these successes within Cleveland, and because the data right now seem to very highly suggest that we're failing at that. So I'm happy to discuss that more. I know that was a bit of a diatribe, but it's just something that's been on my mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Next up, I have Councilwoman Gray.
Okay, thank you, Chair, appreciate it. I just want to say thank you to the team that's here today. I only have a couple of questions. I just want to say thank you to my colleague, Richard Starr, for bringing all that great information of his, of what he has done and what he had exposed, of understanding how he's working with his constituents and also understanding the program, better than I ever heard anyone spoke about. So congratulations to you. I was just all in awe what you, what you've done. So congratulations, how you work well with the built environment workforce development. I just want to say one thing, that the built environment workforce development did come to my community meeting last Thursday. Cordell Stokes, he did a tremendous job. This was the second year that he worked with the constituents in Ward 4. He has a great group, a crowd. A lot of people attended this year as they attended last year. The process was just amazing. All I do was come in and do the introduction, and he said, go away. So I'm happy, but in the sense of I partner with him with my community meeting, whereas he has his group of residents that come all over, and I have my community meeting in another section of the building, whereas those, residents, can go over and attend his course of action. And he does a great job. And he said he's soon going to send me the report of the activity per se, but I am happy to partner up with him as many as I can in Ward 4, because it's helpful for the residents and people to know that they're able to come to his workforce development program in any neighborhood. So I know the next one is in, I believe, Ward 1 or Ward 7. I think it's in Ward 1, I think Ward 7 is. Yes, yes, November 26th, and I encouraged my residents to go there, and also I think the last one is in Ward 7. So I think it's an awesome program. It gives people the initiative to come in and be relaxed and be open and receptive, that they know this program is there to give them an opportunity, to get a job that they want to get, not what that organization want them to have. So they can be more relaxed about that, because I have sent many residents to Ohio Means Job, to get into this program. So I just want to say that much. But I just want to also say, Chair, to anybody at the table, I have 2 apprenticeship programs in Ward 4 already. I believe that you guys are aware of one that's been up and running for the last 4 years, and that's eVision. That's apprenticeship program. Are you aware of eVision? That's been up and running in Ward 4 at least maybe 4 or 5 years. That is, they're located at, I believe, 130, maybe 136. I don't know the exact address, but I can get that to you. But they've been up and running for the last 4 years in the Mount Pleasant neighborhood. Matter of fact, there are Anita Gardner. She's on the board with eVision. That she have known them for years, and they kind of collaborate together, with her center. But they have already transitioned at least 4 to 5 young men into job positions already. So that's a partnership that I believe that is monumental, to work with Ohio Means Job in some type of fashion. But I can get that information to you guys so y'all can have that conversation, because in November, I'm not sure, maybe I get the date, they get ready to have a soft opening. They're going to have a soft opening there, and I can see if I can get y'all in to come to have a conversation to see the magnificent work that they did the renovation to actually upgrade their working environment, to train the young men and women that come in there, to learn the skill. So great organization, and I met them through Anita Gardner per se, but they're doing great work, great strides over there. And the second apprenticeship program is called Build and Construction. He's also in the Mount Pleasant area. You remember him, Mr. Sampson?
Yeah.
He was here.
Yeah.
He was here, and he has, they are doing the renovation right now as well, and his his program going to help attract young kids 12 to 16. And then the eVision attract 16 and older. So they're going to partner together because once the kids, graduate from Mr. Sampson, build and construction class, they're going to partner up and go right over to eVision. So, so we're setting a standard right in the community, whereas the young people, the young kids, the young adults can walk right down the street and be right in the community to learn these skills and not be uncomfortable. Okay, so that's all I have to say. I just wanted to share the information. I want to say congratulations to the good work that I see that you guys have done. I know we got a long way to go, dealing with the percentages that you're showing, but I am definitely going to come down there myself and spend a little bit more time to understand the format of what you're doing at Ohio Means Job. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Jones, are you ready to close us out? Oh, you're on there? Oh.
Yeah, I was having a great, interesting conversation with my colleague Charlie Slife about workforce development and the lack of workforce development, all the problems that businesses have in the city of Cleveland to get work, to sustain work, and to be able to support their families. And I went through a scenario, but I won't go through that now. I'll stay on point here. First, I want to thank Ms. Johnson for her presentation. Often when I come to these types of sessions, there's a few people who grab my attention right away. And you did with your presentation. And the question is sustainability. Because what we're talking about right now, and I think that's what my colleague tried to touch upon, is that in the history of the city of Cleveland, we're notorious for not helping minorities out. And you don't have to go further than the black neighborhood to see the devastation. And you can go there right now and see it. And the reason why you don't have the, and I appreciate you, Madam Chairwoman, for running such a great session here on a very important topic, and when you opened up about how do we have something when we go to these sites and we see people who don't look like us. And our citizens, when we're having development projects in our neighborhood, will say, why don't we have black people working on the project? Why don't we have, we do road work in the city of Cleveland all the time. 24/7, every year, year in and year out, we have road work. We know we have road work. We know we're going to have road work. We know that this work here is going to get done. Why don't we have minority contractors out there working? Why don't we have black people working in the hats? And that's, the only thing I could say, say a number of issues why that is, but the problem is still existing. And when we started this proposition about $10 million, and we had a whole group of folks here, and I asked one simple question, and no one answered. So you had all these people sitting at the table and people sitting in the audience. We're talking about giving $10 million and how the $10 million should work. And I asked one question, and I still ask that question here today. What are we doing any different? Because my colleague Slife hit it on the nail. What are we doing any different now than what we did way back in that space and time that's going to make the difference? And when I looked at the young lady talk about processes and bringing these contractors along and having the loop, that was the first time I ever heard that. And that's 30 years for me, sitting here at this end of the table. Because I go way back when I was a kid and I had, Chris, I'm bringing you in this, so don't get mad at me when I say this. I had hair on my head at the time. Now I'm completely bald-headed sitting here at this table, and we're still talking about the same issue of workforce development. Shoot back in the past when the track star Owens was running, he couldn't feed his family in the city of Cleveland. He was a world champion in this city. And he had to move because no one would give him a job to feed and take care of his family. And that has been the history of this city when you started establishing a community of black folks trying to have, and all they want is just basic stuff, Just treat me fair. We're not asking for any give out handouts. We're just asking for a piece of the pie, an opportunity to exist on God's planet. And he had to leave the city of Cleveland and go to Chicago in order to take care of his family. Now, I'm a black business owner. I got 3 divisions of business. I know what it's like to try to get contracts here. Impossible, unless you know someone. And then here's the next big hit that hurts when you are a business owner. You have someone give you go through these programs. And I've been through a lot of these programs. That's the reason why I asked the question, what are you going to do any different than what you're doing right now? And so for me, the experience has been horrible. So I do all the work that I'm told to do, bring all of my reports, all of my paper, everything, my entire life, my bank accounts, everything, put it all out in the front for the public exposure, spend money out of my pocket in order to get the contract, and still do not get the contract, when my bid is lower than most bids and reasonable. So when we talk about minority businesses, and to answer Charlie Slife's question, it's not an issue where you have a good program in the past. It's just the issue that people are trying to live. And so they're going to go to places where they're going to get support. So I support, Madam Chairwoman, the proposition of having something sustainable. Now, the question would be, how do we keep something like this moving forward? How do we build on it? And I know that you, Madam Chairwoman, to the distinguished lady, I ain't gonna go into all of the slides, but if I may help you, if I can, to add some folks on to your list that should be partners that are doing a lot of work here in the city of Cleveland. And that's the sewer district. They're in need for minority contractors. They tell me all the time they don't have enough workers. They don't have enough black people that work. This would be a great opportunity. The Guardians, they've come to us and they've asked us for support and assistance. They have a lot of jobs that they need to fill. The construction boom in the city of Cleveland moving forward, at least from the folks that I've been talking to, they're complaining about they don't have enough workers. And the only reason why trades are opened up in the way for African Americans now, if they can get them, is because they don't have workers in general anymore like they used to. They don't have the long lines that would come down and want to try to get these jobs. So I would say work with Cleveland Housing Network. We've given them millions of dollars sitting here at this table to build houses. But when we look at their projects, they don't have minorities building homes there. We don't see the minority contractors there. Then I would encourage you to look at the Cavaliers and these workforces that they're trying to put together. So that way you have I would say, an opportunity and a stable of opportunities so that you can keep the people that you get into your pipeline busy. And I think that, for me to share that with you is important. And then another issue too that would be really a sweet spot would be contractors can't hold a lot of paper. So what does that mean? I can't afford to finance your project on my shoulders. So if I got already $60,000 or $70,000 on the plate, there's no way I'm going to be able, unless I have lines of credits that are opened up. Hopefully they're not stiff penalties in those lines of credits, where I can stay afloat and keep my business going. So turnaround for minority businesses is super critical in terms of cash flow. So when we're setting these programs up, we need to be looking at these programs in a way where we are not breaking the very people we're trying to develop and build. And then to be fair, if they're taking care of business, we should be taking care of them. If they're doing a good job, then we need to pat them on the back and say, you're doing a wonderful job. How do we help you expand? How do we help you grow? So those kind of fundamental support systems are very critical to have in play. And then in terms of if you really want to have a program that really works, don't have no show. I've been to so many shows. It's a show. I want to be able to go in and how we do recruitment. We have 3 divisions of business. We go to recreational facilities on our landscaping side. When we need to get young people, we get them young and we get them early and we train them. We train them about what they need to do, how they need to be safe on the job. We train them on work ethic. And we have maintained a consistent workflow of folks. And we start them off early. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. And then those people turn into good employees and contractors. And so I'm only sharing with you the best methods that's worked for me. And I'll say this too. Only because I'm an elected official, I don't do officially any business in the city of Cleveland. But when I started my business, I started out here, and I'm not going to say any names.
Councilman, we got 1 minute.
I'm not going to say any names. If I could be put on the back end, if that's possible, to finish, because I think this is important. Thank you. This is just suggestions, Madam Chairwoman. On the back end, reaching out to those schools, having real people to stimulate and cultivate our young people. And then lastly, I want to say to the director, I went to the ACE program, and I was absolutely thrilled with their presentation and what they were able to do in those presentations. And I thought that that was really wonderful. In fact, they came away with such a good program that, earlier, I'm suggesting that to, our director right now, how we put that in play. So any of these programs that, we're funding here at the table, if you could make it, let us know when those programs are so that I can have an opportunity to attend those programs, as well as make available, because the biggest issue in our neighborhood is a lack of communications and awareness of these various programs that we got. So I hope that we have a marketing side of it, because every time, and I've talked to Mr. Stokes, I always mail out so that we can have a big crowd coming in to our events in Ward 1. So letting the council person know about the programs so that they can participate is very appreciative. And I thank you, Chris, and I thank you, Ms. Johnson, and all of you here for the work that you do. It's not an easy task, and I'm thankful. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for allowing me a little bit over that minute, and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. So, and I'm sorry, I apologize. Our Vice Chair, Councilwoman House Jones, will be closing us out. Here we go.
Just through the chair to the team here, looking at the built environment, it says as of June 2024, are all of those individuals Cleveland residents? They are? Okay. And going to the BE collaborative presentation, and these are all the goals of the pipeline, correct? The 167?
So we actually have a goal of 150 is the total, but we're tasked with 90. And so just really, all those are the identified MBEs. And again,
That are needed?
not
that
necessarily
they're
needed, just out there. Because also if we were just focused on that smaller number, then the idea of them going all the way through, we would make that number significantly smaller.
Say it again.
It would dwindle down like a funnel. So if we have a lot more than the actual attendant goal in the beginning, then the people who will actually do the work and come out on the other end of that is more easier to hit that 90.
Okay, so these are just clarification through the chair to the team here. So, for example, the identified in the universe of some sort is 28 MBEs in the rough carpentry and waterproofing.
Correct.
And going through this process, it'll probably filter down, let's say 15. The idea is to get to the 15 that will then be ready and prepared to bid on contracts, have the mentoring relationship, to already be invited to join people on their proposals. Is that the idea with this pipeline program?
Yes.
Okay. And is this also on the 2026 timeline? This is also in the 2026 timeline. That's the one thing. So, the chair to the team, what's this? Okay, good. So, at what phase is the pipeline in? Let me ask that question. What phase of it is it in?
Through the chair to the vice chair. So right now, they're different phases. So when I'm identifying who those individuals are, and then we have that engagement period, it's the moment of moving through the assessment. So for almost everyone, I'm in that assessment or creating the growth action plan. But it's still, some of them are still going through that engagement piece or being able to interact to where we can get to that assessment part. And that's just something that I explained earlier too. So when we have that identification, I'm just knowing who they are and where they are. Then that engagement piece is so they know who I am. And then I'm able to establish the relationship to complete an honest assessment with them.
And through the chair to the team here, knowing that the companies are on different assessment levels, what areas do you see, what areas have identified are farther along in the process than others? Or is that?
So again, through the chair to the vice chair, being able to identify what those are, some of those consistencies that I've seen is a strong need in the business development and the HR training part. And it really has shocked me, the varying of revenue is even those businesses that are over the 500,000 or even within the millions of annual revenue, they still have missing gaps within the business development part. And so which would also hinder their ability or where they could be seeing success at that $1 million or $2 million. But if we were able to identify those needs on the back end, then where they could be would be a lot more significant than that.
Okay. And then my last question, this is going back to the built environment team, through the chair to director. Can you talk about the WISE Pathways program and how that has potentially yielded, because you talked about I see the results when it comes to women. Is that reflective of the WISE Pathways program or other things?
Through the chair to the vice chair, great question. The WISE Pathways program, for anyone who doesn't know, is the HHW, which stands for Hard-Headed Women Ohio program. And I think they're a huge reason that we have women coming into this program. They just saw an email this morning that they have directed several people from their program into Cleveland Builds, which is the pathway towards union construction. They also are working with APB to develop a project management track for women who are not interested in working in physical construction, and that is often because of fear of working with men. So we talked earlier about how the culture needs to change. One of the challenges is, putting women in positions where they're working with men who are not used to working with women. So that's one of the cultural shifts that needs to happen, that WISE Pathways is really dealing with. So yes, they're also referring people to Tri-C's program. So they're a very great entry point for women to get into the built environment trades. And they cover a lot of things that I think are really interesting, including sort of emotional regulation and self-esteem issues, and some issues that are, I think, very focused on female empowerment that our other projects are not focusing on to the same extent. So yes, thank you for bringing them up specifically.
And then through the chair to the team here, looking at the trainee barrier removal fund, I know it indicated that 147 individuals have utilized that fund. What does that equate to in dollars?
So as of this morning, we're looking at almost 100,000.
Okay. And looking at that, seeing that transportation is through the chair to the team here, understanding the need for transportation specifically in the built environment, what long-term sustainable options are we looking toward? Because I'd actually heard of some other programs about loan car, are there any, okay, let me fully share what just went through in my mind. So there was a program I know at some point in juncture where there was a program to help people get cars financed. It went away. And now, just understanding the built environment, you need to have a car to participate in this field. This is not a field where you can use public transportation. It's not an option. So, and seeing just initially, transportation is 46% of the issue. So are we thinking about, on a long-term strategy basis, what we could do, understanding that is a significant barrier for people to fully engage in this system?
Through the chair to the vice chair, you are touching on a very important and challenging topic that's come up many times in the Built Environment Collaborative. I will tell you that we have a potential lead on at least a pilot where we would do a car loan program. I don't want to say much more about that in a public space because it's not set in stone yet, but I just had another conversation about it this morning, and so we are looking at that. I've also trying to make some connections with dealers to see if there's any willingness to partner. If a large enough dealer could write off car donations, for example, that would be something that would work really well for us. The majority of that money that you're seeing spent in the trainee fund so far is on car repairs. As probably many of you know, and maybe have experienced, like I have, unfortunately, sometimes you can only afford to buy a lemon and then that it meets an immediate need, but in the long term, you're actually spending a lot of money to get that car fixed and keep it running. And so a lot of folks who are getting into these jobs, they might have that car or they're using their mom's car that's that situation or neighbors, that car is going to break down a lot. And so a lot of those costs are car repairs. Which is probably the closest route to, if we could address that on some sort of systemic level, that's probably the best route to getting folks into reliable transportation, though we also recognize that there are people who need access to cars, and so car loans, and so we are working on making that happen.
Right. And so with that, through the chair to the team, a couple of things that come to mind, the connections and the utilization of the financial opportunity centers that are here in the city of Cleveland that we are investing in, understanding the whole thing around addressing debt and credit to help people be in a position to be able to get the car loan. And then secondarily, I will follow up with you regarding the whole car program, because I was made aware of it, and having a conversation to really work through what the challenges and barriers were when you have a willing partner, and then beginning to have some larger conversations with our financial institutions and others when it comes to underwriting and all of the things and insurance. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Great line of questions. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Once again, I know I'm looking forward to the numbers you said. We'll get the updated numbers. I'm not sure if you could just email that. And then I know that we have legislation, which we will be hearing, and maybe we could schedule that next hearing. Because I already have some questions, but just want to be mindful of everyone's time. So we'll just bring you back, and then we'll go through this legislation. But I want to thank you, everyone. As Councilwoman Spencer said, we approve for opportunities, right, and for programming, and you guys are doing a great job in accessing our residents. So looking forward to those numbers, and I'm sure you're going to meet that 3,000. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks for your support.
Adjourn.